It was meant to capture joy, a memory frozen beneath the striped tent of dreams. The year was 1875, and Godfrey's traveling circus dazzled every corner of rural England. Acrobats soared, lions roared, and children screamed with delight. That evening in Bracknell, the troupe gathered for a single photograph before their final show. The ringmaster, Alfred Godfrey, stood proud at the center. Beside him, the strong man posed, the contortionist smiled, and the twin acrobats leaned close. Even the lion sat calmly in its cage when the photographer counted down 3, 2, 1. A hush fell over the tent. Then came the blinding flash. Every face was captured, except one. The clown, Emmett Hale, didn't smile. His painted grin trembled. His eyes were fixed on the darkness behind them. Witnesses later recalled his whisper, "It's here." By dawn, every performer in that photograph was dead. The story begins in Lincolnshire, England, July 1875. A restless summer lay heavy over the English countryside, where heat shimmered above the fields and dust clung to every passing traveler. The industrial age had begun to hum. Trains howled across meadows, spilling out passengers eager for cheap wonders, bright lights, and a taste of escape from their grey, predictable lives. And there was no greater escape than Godfrey's Grand Imperial Circus, a spectacle of sound, smoke, and illusion that had captured hearts across Britain. It wasn't just a show. It was a world within a world, a rolling family of misfits, magicians, and dreamers who lived for the gasps of the crowd. At its heart was Alfred Godfrey, the ringmaster, a man of booming voice and iron discipline, known for his crimson tailcoat and commanding presence. His circus had survived economic crashes, animal strikes, and endless storms. Yet that summer, something followed them that even he couldn't control. Their beloved clown, Milo, could make an audience roar with laughter one minute and weep the next. But backstage, even his painted grin had begun to fade. He told his fellow performers he heard someone laughing back from the dark corners of the tent, a voice that wasn't human. The lion refused to eat. The horses woke screaming in the night, and the strong man, a man who'd never known fear, began refusing to sleep near the cages, swearing that the eyes of the animals glowed long after the lamps were out. Locals whispered that the circus was cursed, that something unseen had boarded one of their wagons back in Norfolk after a show near an old burial ground. Some said they had disturbed the dead, others said they had welcomed it in. Still, the show went on. Because in the circus, fear meant failure, and failure meant hunger. So when a soft-spoken traveling photographer named Benjamin Corcoran appeared at their camp one humid evening, offering to capture a portrait before their final performance in Lincolnshire, Godfrey agreed. The troupe gathered beneath the great striped tent, smiles painted over exhaustion, laughter hiding unease. Corcoran set up his heavy brass camera, unaware of what it was about to preserve. That photograph, developed just hours before the circus went up in flames, would become one of the most chilling artifacts in British history. The last image of Godfrey's circus, before the night everything burned. The photo session took place in the golden haze of late afternoon, just before dusk began to fold over the fields of Lincolnshire. The circus stood like a mirage on the horizon, its great striped tent billowing gently in the wind, the brass band rehearsing faintly in the distance, and the smell of hay, oil, and caramelized sugar drifting through the camp. The performers gathered at the photographer's request, 12 in total, each dressed in the vivid glory that had made Godfrey's Grand Imperial Circus famous from Manchester to Kent. At the center stood Arthur Godfrey, the proud ringmaster, tall and commanding, his red tailcoat glinting under the low sun. His wife, Clara, graceful and poised, stood at his side, her crimson gown rippling like flame against the pale backdrop of the tent. Behind them stood the acrobatic twins, Elias and Samuel, mirror images of each other, known across Britain for their death-defying leaps that seemed to defy gravity itself. Next came Madame Rosa, the fortune-teller, her dark eyes hidden beneath a silk veil, a crystal orb clutched tightly in her pale hands. To their right were the animal handlers, the contortionist, the juggler, and the fire-breather, each embodying a strange kind of pride, the sort only those who lived on the road could understand. They were exhausted, sunburnt, and underpaid, but they belonged to something grander than themselves. And then there was Milo the clown, painted in white and crimson, his grin stretched unnaturally wide beneath his smeared makeup. His eyes, bright blue and unblinking, seemed fixed on something far beyond the camera. Children loved Milo. They called him the man who could make sadness disappear. But that day, his stillness was unsettling, his posture rigid, his shadow wrong. Benjamin Corcoran, the photographer, carefully arranged the heavy wooden tripod and inserted a glass plate into his camera. The air thickened with anticipation. Nearby, children giggled as the calliope played its tired tune, and vendors shouted about toffee and roasted peanuts. Corcoran lifted his hand. "Hold still." For a moment, the entire circus froze. The laughter faded. The only sound was the canvas flapping and the faint cawing of distant crows circling above the field. Then came the flash, a violent burst of magnesium light that turned their faces ghostly white. It lasted a fraction of a second, but in that instant, something changed. When the light dimmed, the troupe laughed again, wiping their eyes, unaware that Corcoran wasn't laughing with them. He stood behind the camera, staring through the lens, pale as chalk, as if he'd glimpsed something no one else had. He didn't say a word. He simply packed his camera, nodded to Arthur Godfrey, and left before the sun had fully set. No one noticed that Milo the clown never blinked once during the entire exposure. And no one saw that his shadow, long and crooked, pointed toward the tent, while everyone else's pointed toward the dying light. That night, the field beyond Bracknell was alive with sound. The great striped tent of Godfrey's Grand Imperial Circus glowed like a lantern in the dark, its torches flickering in the warm summer wind. The band played its usual overture, drums rolling, trumpets blaring, and the crowd cheered as the performers lined up behind the curtain, ready to bring wonder to the weary townsfolk. But beneath the laughter and the noise, something felt wrong. The animals, once obedient and proud, had turned anxious. The elephants stamped their feet and trumpeted before the show began, as though sensing a threat no human eye could see. The horses, usually graceful and precise, refused to enter the ring, snorting and backing away from the entrance flap. Even the tigers, pacing in their cages, growled low and constant, their eyes fixed on something invisible just beyond the lamplight. Still, the show went on. It always did. The audience never saw the unease behind the curtain. They only saw the spectacle, acrobats spinning high above their heads, jugglers tossing torches, and the brass band keeping rhythm as Arthur Godfrey announced each act with booming enthusiasm. Then came the fire jugglers. Their flames burned not orange, but blue. The crowd gasped, thinking it was a trick, but the performers knew it wasn't. The oil smelled wrong, sharp, metallic, unnatural. Backstage, Madame Rosa sat at her table, shuffling her tarot cards for the crowd. But her hands shook uncontrollably. Midway through the reading, she froze. Her pupils dilated. The cards slipped from her grip and scattered across the dirt floor. Arthur chuckled, brushing it off with a grin. "The only ghosts here are the unpaid ones," he said, before stepping back into the light. But then, as the final act began, the laughter died. It was Milo the clown's time to perform, the favorite of every child. His act began as it always did, pratfalls, exaggerated bows, and painted smiles. But when the lanterns flickered, a strange chill rolled through the tent. The laughter thinned. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Milo turned toward the large mirror at the back of the ring, a prop for his famous vanishing clown illusion. He waved at the crowd, bowed dramatically, and then turned back to the glass. The reflection did not move. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, but then the audience realized the mirrored figure was not Milo. Its skin was gray, its eyes hollow, its grin inhumanly wide. It watched him, watched them all. A woman in the front row screamed. Children began to cry. The lanterns flared once more, then died completely, plunging the tent into blackness. When the light returned, Milo stood trembling. The mirror was cracked. The reflection was gone. Arthur ended the show early, muttering something about fatigue, but backstage the performers huddled in silence, their faces pale, their hands shaking. That night, as the camp slept, Madame Rosa woke to the sound of whispering. Her name, repeated softly from the lion cage. She ran, barefoot and hysterical, into the fog. They found her hours later near the wagons, her crystal ball shattered beside her. Etched into the glass, under the flicker of dawn's light, were 12 small handprints, each one perfectly formed, each one pressed from the inside. At first light, Benjamin Corcoran returned to his makeshift darkroom, a small canvas tent pitched near the railway, where the smell of chemical fixers and damp earth hung thick in the air. He'd developed hundreds of portraits before, but that morning felt different. The sun had barely risen, the world still wrapped in grey mist, and yet he swore he could hear faint laughter echoing from the circus grounds in the distance. He brushed it off as exhaustion. He'd slept little, haunted by the memory of Milo's frozen stare. Benjamin began his work as always, preparing the glass plate, pouring the developer, and rocking the tray gently to let the image form. He whistled softly, attuned to calm his nerves, but halfway through the sound died on his lips. Shapes began to appear on the glass, faces emerging from nothing. First the ringmaster, proud and tall, then Clara Godfrey, her crimson dress glowing faintly even in black and white. The twins, smiling as though frozen in motion. Madame Rosa, her veil ghost-like. And finally, Milo the clown, standing just apart from the others, his eyes two hollow black pools. But Benjamin's hand began to tremble, because behind them, barely visible through the chemical haze, was another figure. It was tall, pale, not wearing a costume. Its outline was blurred at first, but the more he stared, the clearer it became. Its mouth was wide open, not in a grin, but in a scream, a sound so silent it seemed to echo in his head. Its hands rested upon the shoulders of the acrobatic twins, long and skeletal, the fingers digging into their costumes like claws. Benjamin stumbled backward, knocking the tray over. The plate shattered, but when he looked down, the image was still there. The figure had moved closer, pressing toward the foreground. Its eyes were empty, yet inside them he saw something terrible. Reflections, flames, the circus tent burning. By dawn, he managed to finish developing one final copy. He sealed it in a wooden frame, his fingers trembling so violently he nearly dropped it again. By noon, Godfrey's circus was gone. The fire began in the menagerie wagon, the same place Madame Rosa had heard the whispers. It spread unnaturally fast, swallowing wagons, tents, and everything within them in less than 10 minutes. Townspeople who rushed to help claimed the flames burned blue, and beneath the roar they heard laughter, not screams, not cries, but pure, gleeful laughter that didn't sound human. When rescuers arrived, the camp was ash. 11 bodies were recovered, their identities confirmed only by fragments of costume and jewelry. But one body was missing. Milo the clown. His costume, the polka-dotted suit and ruffled collar, was found near the ruins of the broken mirror he had used for his vanishing act. The glass was warped, melted in strange patterns, yet it still caught the light. and reflected something faintly visible. Not the ruins, not the rescuers, but a face half smiling, half decayed, looking outward from the other side. Weeks later, long after the ashes of Godfrey's circus had cooled, a small team of local constables searched the remains of Benjamin Corcoran's darkroom. The tent was half collapsed, the scent of burnt chemicals heavy in the air. Inside, beneath a warped metal tray, they found his camera, untouched by the fire, and beside it, a weathered leather-bound journal, its pages soaked but still legible. The last entry was dated 2 days after the fire. Benjamin's handwriting trembled, as if written by someone who could barely hold the pen. He spoke of something in the photograph that grew sharper every time he developed it. He insisted it wasn't a trick of exposure nor a flaw in the lens, but an echo, a trapped fragment of something unseen. He wrote that the image feeds on attention, that each gaze strengthens whatever presence hides within the shadows. The more he examined it, the clearer it became. At first he thought it was madness, but by the 5th development, the 13th figure was no longer faint. It looked alive, staring directly back at him. Benjamin traced the glass plate's origins and discovered it wasn't an ordinary supply shipment. It had once belonged to a Scottish photographer named Silas Murch, who in 1861 claimed his new camera could capture the breath of the dead. Weeks later, Murch was found lifeless in his studio, his eyes burned white, just like Benjamin would be. In Benjamin's final note, one line was circled in red ink. "It's not the camera that's cursed. It's the light. Whatever it reveals, it keeps." When his assistant entered the tent the next morning, the air was thick and metallic. Benjamin sat motionless at his desk, his skin blistered, his face frozen mid-scream. On the table before him was the photograph, perfectly developed. And this time, the 13th figure was smiling. Investigators sealed the image in an evidence box, refusing to destroy it. It now rests in a locked archive in Lincolnshire, marked only Evidence number 237, the Godfrey incident. But those who've handled it since say the edges of the glass keep darkening, as though something inside the photograph is still burning. Still watching, still waiting to be seen again. Hawthorne Vale, once alive with color, laughter, and the echo of drums, is now nothing but an overgrown field. The grass grows tall and wild, but in the center, where the grand tent of Godfrey's circus once stood, the earth remains bare. No flowers bloom there, no birds ever land. Locals call it the Silent Meadow. Farmers who pass by at night swear they hear faint music drifting through the mist, the delicate off-key notes of a calliope organ. And when the moon is high and the air perfectly still, the sound of children's laughter carries through the valley. Soft, fleeting, and impossibly distant, as if the past itself refuses to rest. The photograph of that final night was thought to be lost forever, but in 1928, it resurfaced unexpectedly during an estate auction in London. The auctioneer, a man named Harold Dempsey, refused to reveal its origin, claiming it came from a private collection with a tragic history. Witnesses described the image as unsettling. The performers' faces had faded almost completely, yet the figure behind them, the 13th presence, appeared unnervingly sharp, its mouth slightly open as though it were mid-laugh. Despite its sinister reputation, the photo sold for $42 to a private collector from Bristol named Edwin Lark. 2 weeks later, his home mysteriously burned to the ground. The fire brigade found no evidence of oil, gas, or electrical fault, only blackened ruins. Among the debris, a single glass fragment was discovered in the study, still warm, even hours after the blaze had been extinguished. By the 1950s, the legend of Godfrey's circus had become nothing more than a ghost story, told around campfires and in dimly lit pubs. A story about a circus that laughed too loud, burned too bright, and left behind a photograph that refused to die. Yet every few decades, whispers surface again. Someone claims to have seen a copy of the image. Someone else reports mirrors cracking after it's viewed. And others speak of a faint, smoky smell that lingers in rooms where no fire has been lit. They say the light from that camera, the one that keeps what it reveals, still burns somewhere in the dark, waiting for another flash. Today, near the ruins of Lincolnshire's old railway, a rusted sign still reads, Godfrey's Grand Imperial Circus, one night only. No one knows who maintains it. The land is fenced off now, but if you walk close enough, you might hear it. The faint wheeze of an accordion, a soft laugh in the dark, and the smell of burned sawdust drifting through the wind. Some say that when lightning flashes, for just an instant, the outlines of the big top reappear, and inside, 12 figures stand frozen in the glow, forever smiling for the camera, and behind them, the 13th figure waiting for the next flash, because some performances never end, some lights never go out, and some photographs never stop developing. As always, the truth was never buried. It was just waiting to be found. If you dare to uncover more true horrors history tried to forget, subscribe to Truth Uncaged and step deeper into the darkness where the forgotten still perform. Because in every image, something is always watching,